Hello, everybody, and welcome to Global Conversations, a soul professional series where curiosity leads, consciousness expands, and science meets soul. I'm your host, Camille Miller, joined by my co-hosts, Adam Guzman Poole and Adam Dickinson. Together, we explore the questions humanity is finally ready to ask, bridging worlds, perspectives, and ways of knowing. We're not here to provide answers. We're here to open portals to bigger conversations. Let's begin today's conversation. So today we have with us John Marani. He is a certified astrologer and tarot master, and he's been doing readings for over 36 years. John's background also involves extensive work on teaching and training in adult learners as part of his academic background. And we're going to invite John in. John, thank you so much for being a part of our show today.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here, Camille. Very, very
Yeah.
happy to be here.
I know we are all really excited to talk to you. We've talked a little bit before we turned on the cameras, but I want to start off with a little bit about your origin story and how you began, well, who you were before you started doing this, or if you've always done tarot. Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. I've done tarot for as long as I can remember, I guess.
Hmm.
I started officially at 17 when I got my first tarot deck, but I had been interested in the metaphysical long before that, probably
Okay.
since I was 10 or 11.
Hmm.
And really, one of my relatives, one of my older relatives, she's another Scorpio like myself. She actually treated all of her Scorpio great nephews and nieces a little differently. And that's one of the things at the beginning that kind of keyed me off, especially because the sign of Scorpio actually rules things like the underworld and gangs. And so when I saw her treating
Oh.
us differently, I was like, are we in a gang? Like, what is this? So it kind of drew me into more of the astrological side. And then once I finished high school, I got my mom bought me my first tarot deck and had my chart done on the same day in August of 1989. So that's my official kind of beginning.
Wow. Oh, right. So this has always been, so I guess like all kids, myself, like I always read like my little horoscope in the penny saver.
Yep.
That was my beginning to horoscopes, but became very into it and used to read Linda Goodman all the time.
Oh yeah, she's
And
a
I wouldn't
classic.
and I wouldn't date anyone unless our Linda Goodman said we were actually a good match. Is that crazy? I don't do that today.
Linda Goodman's Love Signs is one of the most well-known
Have two copies.
astrological works. Yeah, it's a
Yep.
classic.
Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. So I just want to start off with, other than astrology and tarot,
Mhm.
what was your academic life? Can you tell us a little bit about your professional life?
Absolutely. So academically, I double majored in college. I was a French major and a music major, so I actually carried both. I spent a year in France, and when I came back, they said you have to spend 5 years if you want both. So I ended up minoring in music and then getting my bachelor's in French, which was a really good choice at the time, simply because music is, I mean, it's a hard way to earn a living in any case, and I know it's very competitive. And I was a pretty good musician, but I wasn't star quality.
Yeah.
So it was a good decision on my part to, I think, to go that way. And then I also have a master's in French as well.
Wow.
Well,
Okay. So I'm just curious, did you ever use your master's in French?
Oh yes, yes. My every job that I have had, pretty much in my entire adult life has been because I could speak French. Almost all of them.
All right, for all you French majors out there.
Yeah, a lot of people were very skeptical. I was kind of mocked and ridiculed in high school when they were like, "You're going to study what?" Um, and that, it was just kind of funny that my federal government life was because I could speak French. I had a number of jobs before that where French was what I had to do all day. Either tech support in French or teaching in French or French teaching itself. I've taught high school and college French as well as now middle school French. Yeah, so French is a very big part of my background.
Tell us a
Can
oh
I, oh, sorry. Can I jump on here, Camille?
yeah.
Sorry. I'm curious because you went a very unconventional, like not many people go music, not many people go French. I'm curious what gave you, like, did tarot or knowing your astrology help support the decisions that you made in the future?
Not really, because at the time I wasn't really reading for myself, and astrologically I didn't really start looking at charts in depth until probably 2005. So I really didn't have the knowledge to really dig in and see if that was something that was supported, that my
Mm,
astrology chart supported. But honestly, I started French because I was good at music as well, and I'm just really good with sounds and languages, and they seem to go well together. So that's kind
mm.
of what I went with.
Perfect. You followed your heart. Yeah.
Mhm.
I also just want to bring up for our listeners that you spent some time in our Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yes, that's correct. My first job was actually as a French language analyst for the
Oh,
FBI. When I was hired, I was hired in 2002, so right after the attacks in 2001. I had been on their list to be a contract linguist, and when I tested for the FBI in French, I said, "Do you have any full-time positions in French?" And I was laughed at. I mean, the woman literally laughed at me because she said, "We do, but there are so few, and no one ever leaves them. So you could just pretty much forget that." Um, and then in January 2002, I had language services of the FBI call me and say, "We have two permanent language positions available in French, and we'd love to give you one. So if you're interested," and so I took one.
wow.
It,
And when did you retire? Adam, you can go after this. When did you retire from the FBI before we dive into the
Last
tarot
September
stuff?
30th. Last September
Oh,
30th.
recently.
Yeah.
All
Yeah, so
right.
I was one of the folks who took the Doge deal. So I technically stopped working in March of last year, but I was an FBI employee through September 30th.
Yeah, John, just to build on that, you and I have that sort of t journey in common where we did leave the FBI for, different reasons and personal reasons. But the thing that really stuck out to me is I had no idea that you were part of, I mean, I guess in the early beginning that you did French for the FBI. And I mean, as you were going through either like the organization or exploring more on your personal side, how did I'm kind of curious your experiences with tarot or astrology influence your career trajectory? Did it because during episode, what is it? Was I episode two or three? I can't two.
You were two.
Yeah, during it, just for background, John, during episode two on our series here, I did describe sort of my experiences with the FBI on how I went down this more intuitive route, spiritual route. And I know you were a big inspiration for me because I remember asking you guidance on how do I step into this sort of role. But you've always been at like a sort of a mentor and friend. So I'm just kind of curious through your journey, how did your personal relationship with intuition, the divine spirit, whatever word you want to use, how did that influence you?
So I started really my FBI journey began in 2002, and it really was in 2005 when I started reading cards professionally, and that's probably where things started to shift for me because I was reading more people in a week or in a month than I had ever before, and my intuition really spiked at that point. And so once I actually told the FBI what I was doing, because as you know, if you do anything to make money that is not related to the bureau, you've got to declare it. Um, and so when I started reading a lot of people, I started using my intuition at the office a lot more. I just wasn't telling people I was actually doing it.
That makes
So
two of us.
yeah, so it got to the point where I would be anticipating what someone might want or need or where something was going to go. Um, and then eventually, people realized, I told certain people at work, I tried to keep that part of me out of work for a very long time. And then I realized there's just no point. And I really can't. I mean, that's part of who I am. So I embraced it at work to the point that I had people coming and asking me, like, when is the next Mercury retrograde? I had people who were like, can we go out at lunch and can you do a tarot reading for me? So like it got to the point where I was very much out. As a Wiccan, people would say I was out of the broom closet at work. That's kind of what we call it. But I started using my intuition a whole lot more at work. And actually, one of my bosses at the FBI, who is no longer with the Bureau, actually asked me to do his chart once. And I did do that for him. He was super interested in it. And I said, yeah, if that's what you want, I will. And he pursued it because I was prepared to let it go. And he was like, oh, no, I want to hear about this. So I really started using my intuition a lot more after 2005, and then it just kind of ramped up from there.
Yeah, I'm so curious who that boss was, but we won't go down that route. Adam, it looks like Adam G, you had a question for John.
Oh no, well, I just want to say, like, I mean, I think for our listeners, I think that's a true testament that it's like when you shine your lights, you give others permission to shine theirs. And I think I just want to honor you, John, for your courage in a place like the FBI to say I do astrology and tarot. And obviously, there's a lot of people hungry for it, even your boss. So I just think that's so cool that that you did that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Camille,
well,
I know you has a question about Mercury retrograde and we can ask her after that.
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, do you go more heavily into tarot or more heavily into astrology, or do you blend the two?
the two are very much blended for me.
They are. Okay.
So let me make the distinction between what my practice is now and what it was. So when I
Mm,
started professionally, I was only doing tarot professionally for the first 4 or so years that I was doing it. So I'm known primarily as a tarot reader, I think, to most people.
hmm
And when people consult me, that's usually what they come looking for. I read 2 days a week at a local shop here in Northern Virginia. And usually when they come for tarot. But when they find out that I'm a professional astrologer and I'm the only astrologer at the store, they usually will come back to get a natal chart done, or at least what I call a mini natal chart, which is a half an hour of just, okay, here's your chart. Here are the very basics of it, and to teach them about it.
Okay, when you say natal chart, can you define that? Is that your energy
Absolutely.
the day you were born? Yeah, can you explain what a natal
Yeah.
chart is?
So a natal chart is the picture of the planets astrologically at the moment of your birth. So the date, place, and time of your birth. And we use latitude and longitude as well as the time to figure
hmm
that out. Now, when it comes to these days, I mean, people have apps on their phones that will pull a chart for them. What a lot of people don't understand is that before 1985 or so, astrologers had to do all that by hand. So part of my certification process was
Ah,
learning how to cast a birth chart, if you will, by hand using books. And for my certification exam, I actually had to do that twice and answer 75 multiple choice questions in 5 hours, which was not easy.
oh
That
my
was
God.
harder than my master's exam.
Oh my gosh.
So the birth chart is very, very important, which is why when people ask, "Can I do a birth chart with no birth time?" Yes, but we lose a lot. Like there's a lot of stuff we can't really get into because we don't know where any of the houses are. We don't know what the rising sign is. And don't feel bad, folks, if you've got to ask your mom when you were born, because pretty much a lot of us do.
Well, yeah.
But understand too that at least in the United States, every state is a little different about how they do the birth times. Some are on the birth certificate, some are on the long form. For example, in Virginia, there's a long form that you don't receive, but you can find out you can get a copy of it so you can find out when your birth time is.
Yeah.
And then if you really don't have a birth time, there is a way called rectification, where we can reverse engineer, if you will, your birth time based on events in your life. And that's called rectification. And we can do that too if you do not know.
That's kind of
So
interesting. I was just going
Yeah.
to say, I'm a mom of multiples, and I knew that even though they were pulled out together because I had a C-section, they had to be 2 minutes apart on the birth certificates.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
their times aren't actually true.
Well, and also keep in mind that with twins, that gets very interesting astrologically because certain twins will pick up the energies of certain planets, the other twin will pick up the others. I've worked with a couple of sets of twins, and they are
Mhm.
very, very different.
Yeah.
Even if they have the same planets, the same rising sign, it's all about how you use the energy. The birth chart is just where I say the chart is where you start. As a person, you decide where you finish because those energies can only push you in a certain way. I like to use the quote from St. Augustine, who
Mhm.
said, "The stars may impel, but they cannot compel."
mm,
Astrology can't make you do anything. They will nudge you in certain directions, but it's up to you as the person. You have free will to choose how you want to use them. So that's why when people want to blame their astrology chart for their bad behavior, it just gets me very upset because it's like, no, no, you still
uh,
chose to take that action, whether you were influenced by the stars or not. It doesn't really matter. You still chose.
okay, I'm gonna jump here because John, I love that because I know that so many people blame the astrology chart. They blame, but I really believe that like one of the greatest gifts we have is our free will,
Yes.
right? And no matter what the stars say, we have the power to choose and influence this world. And so I'm curious to know a bit more about, tell us more about that science of like how am I getting influenced by the stars? So if because I have a bit of an understanding, but some people are like, okay, well, the stars are making me do this. They give me this personality trait. So
Mhm.
how would you describe how the stars do influence us and influence events around us? Yeah.
Okay, so let's take those separately. So, first of
Yeah.
all, understand that every person, as we discussed, has a birth chart or a natal chart, right? But every event also has a natal chart. Every business, every city, every state, every country, they all have a birth chart. And so when you work with a birth chart, you can look at the astrology of events. We call that mundane astrology, world events. So you can pull a chart for a certain time, a certain place, on a certain day, and look at what was going on. So one of the big examples I can use for mundane astrology is the chart of the United States of America. So when the last signature went on the Declaration of Independence, it was about 5:15 at night. We call that the Sibley chart because that was the astrologer who came up with that originally. And so the chart of the United States is used to track events that are happening to the United States. And one way we can use it is we could take, for example, a prospective president or vice president or Speaker of the House or whoever, put their chart up against the Sibley chart, compare. Does this person fit well with the chart of the United States? We can do the same thing with a company. We could I've looked at Apple's chart, Google's chart, Bank of America, and some others. And you could try and say, hey, will the CEO fit with this company? So understand that everything has a chart to work with. So
Did
that's the first part.
did
The
you
second,
ever use this in the FBI?
I was asked at one point to look at a cold case. Yes. I have looked at a couple of personality figures, a couple of people who I got birth times for. And I did look at it a couple of times and I did look at one event. Yes. But it was very much hey, this is a cold case. Can you take a look and like it's
Yeah.
it's really cold. Can you take a look and give us any explanation as to what might have happened? And like I said, it was very much off the cuff from a person. It was not officially assigned to me.
That's incredible.
But
Yeah.
if you think about it, think of if you're sitting at a table, right? You're sitting at one of those big conference room tables. Think about it. On your left-hand side, you have five planets. On your right-hand side, you have five planets. all of these planets have a job to do. And what I think people miss with astrology is that the planet is going to do the job. The planet provides the energy. So, for example, the sun's job is to become. So, as I said, I'm a sun sign Scorpio. My job in this lifetime, if you believe in multiple lifetimes, is, excuse me, to become the best Scorpio I can be, to embrace the good qualities of it. That's the job of the sun. So if you're a Cancer sun, it changes the style. The sign is the how. The planets are the what. So the moon, for example, is your emotional center. So if you have a moon that is very, very watery, like it's a water sign like Scorpio or Cancer or Pisces, you're going to be a lot more sensitive than someone who has a moon in Aries or Taurus, for example. So when you start putting the job of the planet together with the sign, that's when the rubber really starts to meet the road. And that's where we as astrologers start with basic interpretations. But we always, of course, have to talk to the client to find out at what level are you living this chart. You may have all kinds of opportunities. Your chart may be very positive overall, but if you're choosing to use it in a way that isn't, there's not much we can do about that.
So in like relationships, when they say, you know, a Libra goes with an Aquarius or whatever works, it's actually not just those two major signs. It's
Oh
all
no,
of this other stuff
it's all of it.
that matters
Yeah.
too.
And the word for our listeners, the word is synastry. That's the art,
Synastry?
that's the compatibility piece of astrology. So when
Mm.
we do a synastry, we put two charts together on the same page and we compare all of it, not just the sun. So I have seen, for example, where I have one client who is a Sagittarius.
Mhm.
Her last husband, now ex-husband, was a Leo. On paper, that works extremely well, just the sun. But keep in mind, all those planets have a job to do. Mercury deals with communication. Venus has to do with value. Value includes money and love, by the way, not just love. Mars is about our physical intimacy and how we handle stress and conflict, basically how we fight, right? So if I'm looking, those are the three personal planets. So when I'm looking at synastry, if I have one particular person who has a lot of trouble communicating and it doesn't work particularly well with the other person's Mercury, that may be an area of weakness for them. Doesn't mean it can't be overcome, but it's where we look at to start. The same thing with Venus. People want to be loved and give and receive love different ways. And actually, there are places in the chart. There's one, the fifth house deals with how we give love, and the 11th house is how we receive it. So we bring the houses into it as well when we're doing synastry. So we see how everything fits, or in some cases doesn't fit particularly well. And again, a synastry where there's a lot of conflict doesn't necessarily mean that a couple it romantically wouldn't work, or a friendship or a business relationship. But my job as an astrologer is to say, here are the positives, here are the negatives, and you work with them.
Does it change over time as the world and the energies are also shifting?
So the synastry itself are the two natal charts,
Uh-huh.
and those don't change. But
Right.
the planets are always moving. And so, for example, if you have what we call a difficult transit, in other words, if a planet makes a connection to your chart that's very challenging for you, it can certainly have an impact on how you live your life and the relationship itself. For example, Uranus is typically a planet that brings energy that is stagnant and makes it electric. I like to think of Uranus as electricity. Now, realistically, I joke, but we call it the planet that breaks shit. Because when he comes along, he can re-energize things, but not always in the way you expect. And so, for example, if let's say you haven't been maintaining your car very well, okay, you could have a Uranus transit. Uranus might come along and say, you know what, I think your transmission is going to go out. And then he does that to force you to address the problem, to fix it. Uranus is also a planet that often comes up for people who are divorcing. And so when we see that Uranus transit coming, I will often ask a client. I have one client in particular right now who's separating from her partner. And the other night we were talking and she said, "Is there a Uranus transit? I'm really excited. I'm hoping there's a Uranus transit." And I said, "Yes, you have a Uranus transit coming. It's actually going to be making a connection to her sun in the not too distant future." So yeah, so you can work with as you work with the different planets, they have themes, and as they make a connection to your natal chart, it can have a very big impact on you. As a matter of fact, my retirement from the FBI was something that I thought would absolutely potentially happen because I currently have Pluto, the planet of removal, the planet of transformation, making a connection to my son. He has been for the past 4 or 5 years. And during that time, inside the FBI, I changed jobs 4 or 5 times. I moved house 3 times. I am a cancer survivor during that time. So like all these things happen. And Pluto basically said, okay, you got some big changes coming right now because it made a connection to my son, my life force. And so while you can't predict exactly what will happen using the themes of the planets involved, you can make a pretty good guess.
Wow. I have so many questions too, but one thing that you're hitting on that I really like, John, is the themes with the planets, and then you also brought up the conversation around free will. And I'm curious, one thing that I find very unique about you and that I love is that you also integrate tarot. So and I really think this is important for our listeners because I also integrate different modalities in a certain way. But
Mhm.
how does tarot also fit into how you support your ideal client and how you use it for yourself?
So with tarot, a lot of people when they come in to see me at the shop, they want to know what the difference is. Like, why would I choose one service over the other? The answer that I typically give is that if you are looking for more immediate guidance, the next 6 to 12 months, tarot is probably better for that because it's going to give you that. I call tarot a snapshot in time. Or I also call it the metaphysical GPS because it will show you where things are going now. And of course, you have the free will to make changes if you want. But with tarot, it's much more immediate. With astrology, we're looking at longer term cycles. For example, that Pluto transit I was talking about is going to go on for 5 years. Like I'll be done with it probably in early 27, I think, last time I checked. But it's been going on since late 2021. And so knowing that those transits are going on are important. But if people want guidance on, okay, I got 2 job offers, what do I do now? Tarot is probably the better tool for that. Um, and for me, for tarot, I'm very limited. I limit myself of how far out I will look. So typically I will look um, just 6 months to a year. If I'm pressed and a client really wants to know, I'll go a little longer than that, but never longer than 2 years because so many things can change. Um, for further down the road, I typically use astrology for that. Um, and so that's kind of how I support my clients with both. But with tarot, one of the challenges is that a lot of times people do not hear what they're hoping to hear. And that's really where being a metaphysician can be rather difficult because you have to get used to telling people, based on what I'm seeing here, I really don't think this is going to happen, or I really do think that you might lose your job, or I've talked with clients about all kinds of different topics, everything from spirituality to work to family to finance, relationships, relocations, you name it, I've pretty much covered it. But the biggest challenge I think with tarot is that when people hear something they don't want to hear, they have to choose how they're going to react to that. And that can be challenging. So I like to support my clients with tarot as much as I can, with the understanding that what I'm showing them is not necessarily what is going to happen. But it's just if you continue to move in this direction, this is what I expect to happen. And that's a distinction I like people to understand because I am the messenger. My job is to give the message, no more, no less. I will give you the best counsel I can, but your job is to decide what that message means to you.
That's amazing, John. And I love that you yeah, you give people that sort of that agency to decide that this is not in stone. And I'm
Mhm.
curious about that because I really believe that like when we're when you get a reading or something like that, you do have it's just based on the energy that you are holding in this moment when you're holding the cards, when you're like having that intention. And
Yeah.
literally that energy can change like in the snap of the fingers. You're like, okay, well, I'm in this, this is the energy I'm feeling.
Hmm.
How can you, and all I need to do is change my energy and the outcome could be completely different.
Correct.
So I'm curious, how do you support people get a better outcome based on what they have, they've got that bad outcome. How can you support them to make a better decision?
So the best thing I can do is give them what I would call unbiased information. Meaning, I want to remind people that I don't have any skin in the game, if you will, of what they choose to do. Now, when it comes to people who are close to you and you're reading for them, that's where you have to be very, very careful of that because if they're close to you, you want what's best for them. And so one of the things I do, and I'll make this quick aside, but then I'll come back, is if I'm close to someone, I will ask them when if they come to me and ask me for a tarot reading, I'll ask them, what hat do I have on? Do I have my minister hat? Do I have my best friend hat? Do I have my husband hat? Like, what hat do I have on? So I'll know, like, okay, if I'm reading for you, I'm really here to give you the information. And I'm really here to give it to you in an unbiased way. When people come for a tarot reading, they will sometimes bring people along with them. And that's always a very interesting occasion because you'll see the person, like I won't be focused on them, but the person will be usually behind on the left, and they will be kind of nodding their heads as I'm talking. They'll, oh, I just told you that the other day, or they'll kind of help. The challenge that I put to people is I remind them that the tarot is about empowerment. That's my main goal. The way that I support clients the most is by saying to them, what you are seeing here is a snapshot in time and you can change it. I remind them of that. I remind them that they have other options they can consider. In some cases, Adam, I also give them permission. So sometimes people will come to me with a really bad job situation, for example, and I'll pull the cards and I'll see like it's a nightmare. Like I'll just look at the cards and go, oh, I can see why. So sometimes I'm the one who will give them permission, if you will, to say, I think it's time for you to go look for another job. Like you're not crazy. Like this is really bad. Or if they're in a relationship that's not serving them, if I see it, I can say to them, I'm not really sure that this relationship is serving you. What can you do? And I will really empower them. I think that's the biggest way that I can support people is reminding them that they still have a choice. And how they react to this is one of those choices.
I'm curious with any practitioner, but with what you're doing, do you have people that come to you that don't believe in tarot, don't believe in astrology? And if so, how do you deal with that? Or do they just not come to you?
I've
How
had
do you?
I've it's a good question. I've had a
Yeah.
few skeptics come my way. One of the biggest ones was actually my father-in-law. When I first got married, he was kind of like he's a person who was brought up in a very strict religious environment, and he pretty much rejected that, and he's agnostic. So when I started reading cards, I think he was a little bit skeptical of all of it. And now I'll get text messages from him saying, "Hey, can you pull a few cards for me? Because I want to find out about this." Um, which is I
That's
so for
cool.
me to have won him over, which is not something I expected, but he trusts everything that I say. Um, I do have people who are skeptical about it, but generally speaking, by the time they've gotten to me, they've gotten a good recommendation from someone else. And I always recommend, if you're going to use a metaphysical practitioner, you talk to someone who's had a service with them before you actually have a service with them. Talk to someone
Yeah.
first who's
Who's
worked
used
with them.
them? I
But
would
yeah, that's yeah.
sorry.
No,
I
no,
would
go ahead.
assume that when you're using your cards, or even when you were learning, because I know it's a lot to learn these cards,
Oh yeah.
you're also using intuition, though. Is that correct? It's not just
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
cards.
No, the image on the cards speaks to your intuitive center. That's it's a tool.
Okay,
The
okay.
cards are the cards are just a tool. So sometimes I have to laugh because people will say to me, "Oh, I bought that tarot deck, but it doesn't like me." And I look at them and I say, "No, that's plastic and paper. It's not sentient, so it can't have an opinion of you." Um, it may be that you and the cards don't really resonate well together, and that's fine, but let's not anthropomorphize the cards. Let's not make them human. It's a tool, and that's one of the reasons why there are so many thousands of tarot decks out there. I own 238 of them myself, as well as a number of oracle decks. So the tarot deck really is the thing that helps you connect with spirit. That's how I look at it. So it's a tool.
That's amazing. So I have some big astrology questions I want to ask you, particularly for what we're going into this time. I know that I think Neptune and Aries just entered, and so I'm going to ask a question about that. But before we go into those big astrology questions, I'd love to, Camille, I'd love to have a little reading. You think this is about reading time?
Yeah. I'll preface this because we had a conversation before we turned on the microphone that I have a problem with TikTok. So TikTok tarot is my thing. But I'm also very intuitive and I speak to spirit and I'm always like, show me the exact message I need tonight. And before I go to bed every night, I TikTok tarot.
Okay.
And I'm always like, just show me what I need to know tonight. And I am amazed that I always get the exact same reading from however many tarot card people come up. And I never know if it's because that's my message and I don't listen the first time, so it keeps coming back. Could be. Could
Could
be the
be.
algorithm. Could just be like that's the message in the stars because they're reading for a collective. And I always
Right.
say, like, how many people liked this? Oh, well, when they say, like, you're going to be so rich, only millionaires are going to see this tonight. And I was like, but there 10,000 of us liked this, right?
Right.
Or 10,000 of us becoming millionaires tonight, that kind of thing. So I've always been intrigued by it, but also don't have the answer because I don't read tarot. But
I do a one card tarot pull every day that I record. So I record a video a day and I just
okay,
pull one card for the day and I give three kind of key messages with the card.
for the
Just for
collective.
everybody, for the
Okay,
collective. Yeah.
okay,
And when I first thought about that, I have a friend who's helping me with all my social media stuff, and he basically said to me, "You definitely want to do this." And I thought, I don't know that I want to do this kind of just a reading in the air for everybody. Like, yo, why?
hmm
And he said, because everybody finds something to hook on to. No matter what it is, like no matter what you say, there are people who this is going to resonate with. And so you should do it. And I said, okay. So I started, January 6th was my first one, but I've been doing them ever since. And it's really interesting because I definitely get people who will contact me and say, this is the
Yep.
reading I needed today. Like I absolutely needed to hear that, or that was spot on. Um, so I definitely think there's something to get out of it. At the very least, it makes you consider certain things. Now that's
Yeah.
why I distill it down to three different points. I'll just say, here are your 3 points for today, and things for people to remember as they go about their day. That's really it.
And my next question, I did volunteer for our listeners. I did volunteer to have a reading. Um, how do you, well, you told us before we turned on the camera that you actually do it with an app.
Yeah.
But I
Uh-huh.
have a question that you have 250 decks. So
Yeah.
how do you know which one's calling you in this day? Do you just not use those? Like how? Just how?
So I have a certain, so I use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck generally,
Okay.
and what they call Rider-Waite-Smith clones. So those are the ones that have the imagery that's closest to the original Rider-Waite-Smith. That's usually what I use.
Okay.
However, for purposes of the daily draw, a lot of my tarot decks are not used because I'm a collector. And so I've taken the opportunity to use, I'm going to go through all the ones I have, and then start going through them again once I burn through all 238 or whatever. Who knows how many more I'll have by then. But
Wow.
as time goes on, I just kind of so today I was putting together some plans for what I'm going to be doing next, and I just pulled open one of my drawers. Behind me, I actually have two cabinets filled with tarot decks. And honestly, I just decide, okay, tomorrow I'm going to use this one, and then in the next week I'm going to pull these and decide kind of on the fly which one I'm going to use in a given day. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I'm ready for my reading.
All right. I think we can manage that. So
Let's
what
do
I
it.
want to what I want to let people know is that this is something that a lot of people kind of go, wait, what? You can do that with tarot? I'm like, yeah, you absolutely can, because the cards are a tool. That's it. Whether they're virtual cards or in-person cards, it doesn't really matter. It's about you using the tool. That's the important part.
Do you have
Um,
to set the intention first? Is
I
that
usually when I talk to the client, I'll say, hey, what is it you're looking for? Oh, we'll talk about it first. And then what you'll see in the app is you'll see that it can actually cut and shuffle the cards too. So it will do that, so I can shuffle. If the client is with me and I'm using the cards, then I usually let them shuffle. But at that point where I usually put my intention on it. I'll say,
okay?
okay, here's how this is going to go. So let me see here what we're doing with this. It for some reason is not showing my iPad on here. I'm going to look for it, but it's not. Typically, that's what I use for when I do tarot readings, so I'm not sure why it's not showing up.
You
Well,
could
what
just
we
do
could
it
do,
and then
John,
just
you could just do, you just tell
yeah,
us what it is.
yeah.
Yes.
Just
And then for
Okay.
our
we
listeners, yeah, you
trust
just,
you.
No worries.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, let me go ahead and
Show
pull it
us.
up. So, Camille, did you have anything specific you wanted to talk to me about tonight?
Um, not well.
Yeah, Camille, let's hear the juicy secret.
Not really specific, but I do feel like I'm going through a transition, like
Okay.
an unknown transition that has a lot to do with my work in the world. Let's just
Okay.
say that.
And your astrological sign is what?
Libra.
Libra. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm going to pull three cards, and I'm going to call this reading the three things you need to know. And we'll go
Perfect.
from there. Okay.
I always ask Spirit, what does my soul need to know tonight?
Okay.
Mm.
So the first card I've drawn is the Seven of Pentacles. The Seven of Pentacles is a card of assessment and reassessment. So
Hmm.
one of the first things that I would tell you is I need you to really look at where you are now and drill into the details of it. And this is actually good because the reassessment often represents a positive turning point.
Hmm.
And so if you think about where you were even 6 months or a year ago, I think what you'll see is that there's been some growth there. I pulled the seven of wands on top of it as well to clarify. And I will say that certainly there have been some challenges. Like you've hit some walls, no
Hmm.
question about that. But then underneath it, I pulled the Four of Cups, which tells me that likely your overall outlook has improved in the last 6 to 12 months, because the Four of Cups often represents kind of apathy, like a blah, and that's where you were, but that's not where you are now. And so as I drill a little deeper in there, I see that that's there. And so I think it's a real positive that you are where you are for now. And I think if you reassess, you'll see like, okay, I'm definitely better, especially emotionally. I would say you're in a better spot than you were 6 to 12 months ago.
True.
So I'll say that. The second part, the second piece of advice I would give you has to do with pain and dealing with past pain. So I've pulled the Three of Swords, which is three swords through a heart, which is a tough one to work with. It can represent any kind of pain, not just romantic, but friendship. And often the really sad part is that pain comes from people who are very close to us. It's usually secret. And this pain is something that you've been working through for the past 6 to 12 months. And sometimes, some days you do very well with it, and other days you really don't. The Knight of Cups is on top of it, which tells me that there's a lot of up and down emotionally with this pain. You're handling it. You're handling it generally well. You don't want people to see that you're dealing with it. But I know that the pain and how you're dealing with it also comes from I would say potentially some anxiety because I've got the Nine of Swords here, which actually represents a woman sitting up in bed at night. And so one of the things I would tell you is that you need to be very aware of what your mental health is doing. And if past pain is causing you anxiety, that's something you can definitely work on. And there's been some improvement. Some days are better than others, which can be pretty much said of most any kind of emotional pain. I see that you're working through it and it is improving, but that's something I would throw out to you as well.
Okay.
Finally, I have the Three of Wands. The Three of Wands is a card of hopeful moving forward as a leader. Now, Libra is a cardinal sign, and for those of you who don't know what that is, a cardinal sign begins every season. So our four cardinal signs of the zodiac are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And this shows you very much in a leadership position. I have the star underneath it, which says, okay, this is time for you to realize all of the opportunities that are out there and to be open to them. There are plenty, more than enough for you. The only caution I would say is that I'm pulling the Ten of Swords, which says you need to be very aware of either allowing other people to take advantage of you and or that you're getting enough rest, because both of those can come up. So if there's anything sleep-wise you need to handle, I would definitely handle it. But this Three of Wands is about you being the leader. It's actually one person on a card looking out over an ocean of opportunities. And so I would say step into your power as a leader and don't look at the world as a place of scarcity. Look at it as a place of
abundance
and tons of opportunities, but you cannot take on too much. That's the warning of the Ten of Swords. If you do that, it's the Ten of Swords often does represent burnout. So know that the opportunities are there. Just be very careful of which ones you take so that you don't feel like you're being sucked dry emotionally or otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right, Camille, what do you say on it? How's John as a reader?
Good. I don't know what the heartache, the loss, I don't know what that is. The only thing that I've consciously said to myself is to work on actually self-love.
Okay.
Right? Not a love, there's no pain from any past loves, but
that Three of Swords is a card that in certain contexts can also represent I'm screwing myself.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
Self-love is a thing, then yeah, I could absolutely see. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily come from without, but as I said, it comes from the people who love us the most. And aren't we supposed to love ourselves the most?
Yeah. The last one, the card with the leadership, that is kind of the same that my spirit team keeps telling me of this is a time to rise. All of this is going to be happening.
Yeah.
Be careful, but also, yeah.
The be careful part is definitely muted because when I read cards, I'll pull a main card and then I'll pull other cards as clarifiers,
Yeah.
and the Ten of Swords is a clarifier. So it's down under, which says, okay, yes, be careful, but I'm not worried.
Yeah. My own team is telling me lately to not not to be like who I was in my 40s or even my early 50s of the hustle and grind. Now
Hmm.
is a time to be stepping into my wisdom and holding my space as a
Yeah,
leader and as an elder. And that's what I keep hearing. And that is really hard to do. But it's also it's like stop. Like when you stop moving, that's when you lead.
right.
Like not to do and do and do. And I am burning out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of the transition that I've been kind of going through in my head. So that is true. I forget what the first card was.
The first card was your reassessment point. This is your,
Right,
this is
which is
your,
exactly what I'm doing. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so good, very good reading.
Glad. Thank you.
That's
I appreciate that.
well, John, I want to just follow up as because Camille's a good example of like leading the way, and I know that we're in this astrological time where we're in the year of the fire horse. We just
Mhm.
entered the year of the fire horse, and we're also in this time of, I believe it's Neptune and Aries are coming to get they've came together.
Yep.
And then we just had an eclipse, and there's like all this astrological phenomenon happening. And I think that the same year that Aries, like the last time that Neptune was in Aries, it was the Civil War. So I've been
Correct.
hearing that there's been a lot of like right now there's like this like upheaval. There's a lot of upheaval and changing energy that's happening. Can you give, well, me and our listeners, what should we expect? How should we be approaching this year of the fire horse and this time, and so that we can really meet it in the best possible way?
Excellent question. So, astrologically, as you said, there was a lot going on. So, let's break it down. So, the first part is we do have Neptune entering Aries right now. Neptune entered Aries just a couple of weeks ago. Now, the significant part of that, as you said, is that the last time Neptune entered Aries, it was just before the Civil War. Neptune has a cycle that's about 165 years, which means it takes that long for Aries to go through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Excuse me, Neptune. Neptune just left Pisces. Neptune's favorite sign, its most comfortable sign, is Pisces, and it was there for about 14 years. Okay, so as Neptune moves into Aries, it's a place where it is not as comfortable as it was. It isn't. Aries is the sign of the trendsetter. Aries is the motto of Aries is I am. So, on a spiritual level, because remember, we talked about what the different planets do, right? Neptune's job is spiritual connection, as well as forgiveness, as well as a lot of other areas that are, we call it a higher octave of Venus. So Neptune does things like poetry and music and the arts and acting and dance. And those things are important. And as Neptune moves into Aries, we really have to rethink how we connect with spirit, for one thing, because intuition is a part of this. But we also have to understand that we are going to be outside of our comfort zone in these areas. On the negative side, Neptune does also represent things like addiction and secrets. Neptune is a planet that hides things, it obscures things. And so, one of the things that's happening, and I think recently with the release of the Epstein files, that's definitely a Neptune and Aries kind of thing, where people are like, oh, wow, look at these revelations that are now coming out that have been hidden for so long. With Neptune and Aries, I expect that to continue for a while. That stuff's going to come out and people are going to have a certain reaction to it. It's Aries is the warrior, and so it's going to get people on the defensive, a lot of what we're going to see. On a spiritual level, like I said, we have to figure out how we are going to reconnect with spirit. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stop doing what we're doing, but the idea is, what new things can I bring in? What's become stagnant? How can I connect that's different from before? Again, Aries is a sign that is, they are completely a maverick. They come in and they say, okay, here are the things I want to do. So, what I would say to the listeners is, with Neptune and Aries, Think about what you want to accomplish spiritually and make it more of a long-term plan, not a short-term plan. I mean, Neptune's going to be in Aries for quite some time, so we don't have to do all this in the next month. But where would you like to be in 5, 10 years on a spiritual level? What are those things that are important to you? So there's that. Saturn also moved into Aries recently. Now, Saturn has a lot smaller of a cycle. Saturn has a 29-year cycle. So every 2.5 years, Saturn changes signs. Now, Saturn is not a fan of Aries, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So in astrological terms, we call that a planet in its fall. And that's why the fall is another word for autumn. It's actually an astrological term because when the sun is in Libra, the sun is in its fall because the sun struggles in Libra because the sun wants me, 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 and Libra wants the other person, the other person. They tend to be more focused on the other. When it comes to Saturn, Saturn was considered the anti-sun by the ancients because we could only see 7 planets until 1781 when we discovered Uranus. So we could only see 7. Saturn was the furthest planet from the sun, so it was considered the bad boy of the astrological world for a very long time. Aries is a sign that is exalted in for the sun. So when the sun is in Aries, it's very powerful there. And so when Saturn is in Aries, there's very much a disconnect between the two. So Saturn in Aries really is going to force us to really look at our boundaries, folks, because boundaries are part of the Saturn message. Discipline is part of the Saturn message. And right now with Saturn in Aries, it can be very tempting to say, well, my boundaries are fine, but I really don't want to respect those of other people. So boundaries are going to be a big deal. Focusing on our long-term goals might be a big deal. Saturn in Aries is great, for example, if you want to get in shape, because Saturn will give you the discipline. Aries is very much a physical sign. It's ruled by Mars. So it's a great time if you want to start some kind of new exercise program, you want to get out there and be healthier, you want to walk or run or whatever it is. Saturn in Aries is great for that. But you really have to examine your personal boundaries and react accordingly if your boundaries are violated. You've got to tell people what they are, and then with Aries, there might be quite a strong reaction when they're violated. Maybe that's the thing that needs to happen. Boundaries is a conversation that I have to have with a lot of my clients because Saturn very much is the boundaries planet. Now, Saturn gets a bad rap, okay? He's also the Grim Reaper, okay? He's the guy who says, this time on Earth, you're done. And his job is to keep us on the straight and narrow. So he's not a fun planet. I call him the taskmaster of the zodiac. He's also the guy who really does not have a lot of fun. He's not Jupiter. People love Jupiter because Jupiter's Mr. Fun. But Saturn is not. And so Saturn in Aries may be a struggle for quite a few people, but his job is to push us to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, we have good boundaries and solid boundaries for our energy, and that we're using our energy for long-term growth. That's going to be the big deal with Saturn in Aries. Now, again, we only have Saturn in Aries for 2.5 years, so that's not going to be as big a deal, but we look to our boundaries now. Then there's the eclipse. So we have eclipses in pairs, right? So we just had a solar eclipse, which is always at the new moon. We have a lunar eclipse coming up on March 3rd. That's the full moon. Now, with clients, what I typically do is I will look at their chart and see what area of the chart is being hit by the eclipse to know what things are going to be energized for you. In my particular case, I know there's a lot of money stuff coming because this eclipse is hitting my second house of money and finances. Keep in mind, eclipses are 3 to 6 months of effect before and after the eclipse. So if you have an astrologer, that's something I would definitely ask. If you know how to look at your chart and look at the eclipse chart, take a look and see what is it hitting. If it's coming close to a planet, that planet is going to be very important for you over the next 3 to 6 months. Here's a cool trick though that everybody can do. So all of the eclipses happen in 19-year increments. In other words, this eclipse was at 28 Aquarius, okay? If you were to look back 19 years from from this eclipse, what were you doing? Because there are echoes of what you were doing 19 years ago now. And you can do that with any of the eclipses because the eclipse degrees repeat every 19 years. So that's something everyone as a listener could do. Just think about what you were doing 19 years ago. So we've got those two eclipses coming. Solar eclipses typically involve things that are around us, that are happening to people around us, while lunar eclipses get very personal and emotional. And we have that eclipse, that lunar eclipse coming up in Pisces, which is going to be interesting, especially because the moon at that time will be on a full moon. The moon and the sun are in opposite signs. So the sun will be in Pisces, the moon will be in Virgo. And Virgo moon tends to put an analytical kind of film on anything that's emotional. In other words, it runs all the emotions through the brain before we actually feel them in the heart. And so with that eclipse, I expect a lot of people to be kind of shaken up because on an emotional level, this is a lot. And remember that eclipses have 10 times the energy of a normal full moon or new moon. So a lot of things happen around eclipses. We actually lose a lot of people. I mean, we just lost Robert Duvall recently, for example, but we lose a lot of people through death around eclipses, people and animals. So keep that in mind as well, that this in-between eclipse period is always very energetically very heavy. And then we have other eclipses coming up later in the year. But remember, folks, that eclipses are portals. They open up new parts of our life to us. They close some doors behind us. So really think about what you were doing 19 years ago, and you could probably make a parallel to what's going on in your life now.
I just want to say, I just used the calculator to figure out where I was 19 years ago. And I went through the exact same transition and thought period of where I was, and then ended a whole career and walked out of management and did something else.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Eclipses are fascinating.
Yeah.
There's so much you can say about eclipses. They're very powerful and they bring about a lot of change.
That's really awesome. Well, John, I think before we leave you, I'd love to ask you a question. You know, this is the soul professional movement, and people are coming as, you know, what do you feel the responsibility as a soul professional is in this current point in history? What is our role and our job right now?
I would say our biggest role is to provide people as best counsel as we can without the "this is what I would do" part of it. And I'm going to explain that. So when people come for guidance, they often have an idea of what you're going to say. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they really do know what you're going to say, and sometimes they don't. But when people ask for advice of, you know, what would you do in this situation? What I try to do is I try to focus on the part that this person is not me. In other words, me in a situation and you, Adam, or you, Adam, or you, Camille, in a given situation, there are certain things that each one of us are prepared to do, and there are certain things that we're not. So as a metaphysical practitioner, I think one of the biggest things I can do, in addition to empowering people with information, is to say, I want you to do what you feel is best for you at this time. And here are some possibilities. So, for example, I had a couple who were living in two different cities, and there was a good 4 hours of driving time between them. And they were getting married, and they said, "Should we live at her house? Should we live at my house, his house, or should we live somewhere in between?" And when I was pulling the cards, I definitely saw that in between would probably be a better choice for them. So I told them that. They decided not to do that. They decided to move to his house, and they're perfectly happy. And so what I say to people is, as a metaphysical practitioner, my job is to empower people with information, but be aware that what I propose and what I say is not necessarily what people are going to do, which is why my ego does not get involved in tarot reading. I don't get upset if someone says to me, "Hey, John, I was here last month and you told me X, and I thought that was ridiculous, and so I tried something else." and it didn't work, so let's talk about it. Like, okay, it doesn't matter whether I told them to do it or not, or if they chose to do something different. I hope that's making sense. I don't want people to feel like they're coming to me, and if they don't do what I say, that I'm somehow going to be upset. No, I think we answer people with empowerment. We give them the information, we empower them with it, and then we have the selflessness to say, this is not about me, this is about you, and I want you to make the best decision for you. And this is especially important, for example, when people come to me with medical questions, because I am not a doctor, and I tell people, I am not a doctor, I don't play one on TV. I have no medical knowledge. All I can do is tell you what I see. You and your medical team will make the best decision for you, and that's what I want. And I think for a metaphysical practitioner to be able to say that is very powerful because it's not about us. And I think too many metaphysical professionals believe that it is about them, and I have a very serious problem with that.
Well, John, I think that also resonates with me when I give my Akashic record readings. So I thank you for pointing that out. And then Adam G's question really hit home for me, and your response definitely resonates, especially what's happening now in the world. But as we sort of wrap up, I know how I can get in touch with you. But can you tell for our listeners how they can find you, how they can follow you and learn more about your work? Yeah, let us know.
Absolutely. So I've made this very simple. So I am Astro Tarot John, all one word, all lowercase. It's John. Okay, and I am that on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I am on all those. My email is astrotarotjohn@gmail. So you can feel free to email me directly. But you can look for me at all those places. As I said, I'm doing tarot content once a day. So you'll see a video from me. Typically, they come out at 9:30 East Coast time in the morning here in the States. But one other thing I wanted to mention is that I've started doing a Twitch stream as well for tarot and astrology, which I have once a week. And I believe this week I'm going to be doing Jeffrey Epstein's astrology chart.
Wow.
So would love for people to tune in for that. That's going to be Friday night at 7 p.m. East Coast. But if you look for me on Twitch, you'll also find me at Astro Tarot John there as well. Same handle.
Terrific. Thank you, John, so much for your time and all of your incredible wisdom that you brought. This is a great episode. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your time and the opportunity to do this. I'm really glad I could be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Joy
thank
to have
you.
you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, all of our listeners, for joining us for this episode of Global Conversations, part of the Soul Professional Global Conversation series. If today's dialogue sparks something for you, we invite you to continue the conversation by subscribing, sharing this episode, or connecting with the Soul Professional community at soulprofessional.com. This series is an open invitation to explore, question, and expand together. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious, and stay connected.